Every homeowner has faced it at some point. You turn the key, the lock resists, and no matter how much you jiggle it, the door simply will not open smoothly. Before you assume the entire lock is broken and rush to buy a replacement, there's a surprisingly simple culprit that causes more lock failures than most people realize, and it has nothing to do with the lock mechanism itself. It has everything to do with a single screw. Yes, one tiny screw, often overlooked during routine home maintenance, can be the difference between a door that locks effortlessly and one that jams, sticks, or refuses to turn at all. To understand why this happens, you first need to understand how a standard door lock is constructed. Most interior and exterior locks, whether they are simple knob locks or more secure deadbolts, are held together by screws that pass through the strike plate, the faceplate, and the internal mounting hardware. And these screws keep the entire assembly aligned so that the bolt slides smoothly into the strike plate on the door frame. When everything is properly aligned, locking and unlocking feels effortless. But when even one screw becomes loose, over-tightened, or slightly misaligned, the entire geometry of the lock shifts just enough to throw off that smooth motion. This is where the screw trick comes in, and why it can be both a helpful diagnostic tool and, if done incorrectly, a way to accidentally disable your lock. Many homeowners have discovered that adjusting the screws on the strike plate or the lock faceplate, even by a fraction of a turn, can either fix a sticking lock or completely stop it from working. If you tighten the screws unevenly, the faceplate can pull slightly out of square, causing the bolt to bind against the frame instead of sliding freely. If you over-tighten a mounting screw, you can actually warp the thin metal housing that surrounds the latch, creating friction that was never there before. This is why a lock that worked perfectly for years can suddenly become stubborn after a simple maintenance task like tightening a wobbly doorknob. For Canadian and northern homeowners in particular, this issue often becomes noticeable during seasonal transitions. As temperatures drop and humidity levels shift, wood door frames expand and contract, and homeowners frequently respond by tightening screws they assume have simply worked themselves loose. But tightening in the wrong sequence, or applying too much pressure to one screw before the others, can pull the strike plate out of alignment with the latch. What seems like a helpful fix ends up creating a locking mechanism that binds every time you try to turn the key. Understanding this screw trick is valuable not just for troubleshooting, but for preventing costly service calls. Locksmiths are often called out to homes where the actual problem is nothing more than a misaligned strike plate or an unevenly tightened faceplate screw. In many cases, homeowners pay for a full lock replacement when all that was truly needed was a few minutes of careful screw adjustment. Knowing how to check and correct this yourself can save real money and spare you the frustration of being locked out of your own home. So how do you use this knowledge to your advantage instead of accidentally sabotaging your own lock? Start by examining the strike plate on the door frame, which is the metal plate with a hole that the bolt slides into. Loosen all the screws slightly first, rather than tightening one fully before moving to the next. This allows the plate to settle into its natural position instead of being pulled crooked by uneven pressure. Once the plate is sitting flush and level, tighten each screw a little at a time, moving between them in a rotating pattern rather than fully securing one side before touching the other. This even, gradual tightening keeps the plate square and prevents the kind of misalignment that causes binding. Next, test the lock slowly after each adjustment. Insert the key and turn it gently, feeling for any resistance. If you notice the bolt scraping or catching at any point, that is a clear sign the plate still needs a small adjustment. Sometimes the fix is as simple as loosening one screw by a quarter turn to allow the plate to shift back into proper alignment with the latch. This kind of patient, incremental approach is what separates a helpful screw adjustment from one that accidentally locks you out of your own house. It is also worth paying attention to the screws on the interior side of the lock, particularly on the mounting plate that holds the knob or deadbolt cylinder in place. These screws should be snug enough to prevent wobbling, but not so tight that they compress the internal spring mechanism. Over-tightening here can prevent the internal cylinder from rotating freely, which feels identical to a broken lock from the outside, even though the actual mechanism inside is perfectly functional. This is one of the most common mistakes homeowners make when trying to fix a wiggly doorknob, tightening the mounting screws far more than necessary and inadvertently creating a new problem while solving the old one. Beyond the screw trick itself, this topic opens the door to a broader conversation about home lock maintenance that every homeowner should understand. Locks are mechanical devices, and like any mechanical device, they benefit from periodic attention. A few simple habits can prevent the majority of lock problems before they start. First, lubricate the lock cylinder once or twice a year using a graphite-based lubricant rather than oil-based products, which can attract dust and grime that gums up the internal pins over time. Second, check the alignment of your strike plate seasonally, especially if you live somewhere with significant temperature swings that cause wood frames to shift. Third, inspect all visible screws for looseness, but resist the urge to over-tighten them without first checking whether the plate or faceplate is sitting flush and square. Another often overlooked factor is the door itself. Even a perfectly adjusted lock can fail to function properly if the door has shifted on its hinges. Hinges loosen over time due to repeated use, humidity changes, and the sheer weight of the door pulling on the screws that anchor it to the frame. When a door sags even slightly, the entire alignment between the latch and the strike plate changes, which can make a previously smooth lock suddenly feel stiff or resistant. If you have already tried adjusting the strike plate screws and the lock still struggles, it is worth checking the hinge screws as well, since a sagging door is one of the most common hidden causes of lock trouble in older homes. It is easy to underestimate how much small mechanical details affect the everyday function of your home, but locks are a perfect example of how something as minor as a single screw can have an outsized impact. This is especially important for homeowners to understand because a malfunctioning lock is not just an inconvenience, it is also a security concern. A door that does not lock properly, or one that requires excessive force to secure, may not actually be providing the protection you think it is. In some cases, forcing a misaligned lock repeatedly can cause premature wear on the bolt or the strike plate, leading to a lock that eventually fails completely and needs to be replaced far sooner than it should. If you find that adjusting the screws does not resolve the issue, it may be time to inspect the lock hardware itself for signs of wear. Over years of use, the internal springs and pins inside a lock cylinder can weaken, and the bolt itself can develop small burrs or rough edges that catch against the strike plate no matter how well aligned everything is. In these cases, no amount of screw adjustment will fully resolve the problem, and replacing the lock hardware becomes the more practical solution. However, before jumping to that conclusion, it is always worth ruling out simple alignment issues first, since they are by far the most common and least expensive cause of a sticking or non-functioning lock. For homeowners who want to take a proactive approach, building lock maintenance into your seasonal home care routine is one of the smartest habits you can develop. Just as you might check your smoke detectors or inspect your gutters twice a year, taking a few minutes to test every lock in your home, check for looseness, and confirm smooth operation can prevent frustrating surprises down the road. This is particularly important for exterior doors, which endure more wear from daily use, weather exposure, and temperature fluctuations than interior doors. Ultimately, the lesson behind this simple screw trick is a reminder that home maintenance is often about small, deliberate actions rather than major repairs. A lock that suddenly stops working is rarely a sign that the entire unit is broken beyond repair. More often than not, it is a sign that something small, like an unevenly tightened screw or a slightly shifted strike plate, has thrown off the delicate alignment that allows the lock to function smoothly. By understanding how these screws influence the lock's performance, homeowners can save themselves the cost of unnecessary replacements, avoid emergency locksmith visits, and keep their doors functioning reliably all year round. The next time you notice a lock feeling stiff, resistant, or difficult to turn, resist the urge to immediately replace it. Instead, take a closer look at the screws holding the strike plate and faceplate in position. Loosen them slightly, allow the plate to settle, and retighten evenly using a slow, rotating pattern rather than fully securing one screw at a time. This small adjustment, understanding the true power of a single screw, can be the difference between a lock that frustrates you every single day and one that works exactly as it should, quietly and reliably, for years to come.